Today on Nova Legends podcast, I want to talk about the VHSL and how the current structure has harmed football and why football is not as special as it was when I was in high school and at Robinson in 1984, when playoff football was king and just actually being in the playoffs was just an amazing feat. Yesterday, I was at the Freedom Madison State semifinal. Um, Two great teams, Madison, defending champs from the Northern region, um, going against probably one of the best teams in the history of the state of Virginia, even though I haven't followed it that closely. But I doubt that there have been teams that can handle Freedom Woodbridge, as they proved against DeMatha, and as they proved in the last 2 years with just huge blowouts against really good teams, including an undefeated Battlefield last week and all the games they won last year. I was talking to a guy on the sidelines about Freedom's incredible running back, Jeff Overton, and I said he's the best running back I've ever seen in high school. And again, I haven't seen every high school running back, and I'm sure there's some out there today that are incredible across the country. But in terms of who I've seen live, I have never seen a better running back than Jeff Overton. And I went to school with Chris Warren, who's a Hall of Fame nominee in the NFL. I played basketball with Chris, and and I've heard legend of Damon Boone, but I never saw him play the West Springfield running back. But when I was talking about this, I mentioned that Chris Warren never got to the postseason in football. Robinson, I think both years, his junior and senior year, Chris played JV as a sophomore, but his junior and senior year, they were, I think, 8-2 both years, I believe, and they did not qualify. Only one team from each district went to regionals, and TC Williams was very strong. Everyone was strong in the northern region at the time. TC, West Springfield, Lake Braddock, Oakton, Woodson. So it was tough getting, but Chris wasn't harmed by that. We weren't harmed by that because those memories of those great games are still with us. And the fact that you had to qualify and you had to win the district to get out of there, it made those October district games just unbelievable, thrilling games to watch. Now, what we have with football are just watered down competition, just ridiculous outcomes in some cases, and also inequity. And just to explain that, when you talk about watered down, Phoebus is a great football team. I believe they've won numerous state champions, and this year they went from class 3 to class 4 because we have 6 classifications. When I was growing up, there were 3 classifications. There was single A, double A, and triple A. Triple A were the biggest. I think for football, I think it changed in 85 or 86, and we have 6 classifications. So we go from 6A all the way down to 1A. And so obviously, I think there are approximately like 50 or so teams in each classification, maybe. Sometimes the classifications, because you have smaller amount of schools, it's a big state, at least it covers a lot of area. You have to string together teams to be in the same district from far away, or you have to combine in a district teams from different classifications. So what you'll have sometimes is playoff games like we had this year. Phoebus played Jamestown, and the score was 104-0. Now, a lot of people were giving Coach Jeremy Blunt a hard time for that score, and he admitted that maybe he didn't handle it well. But it's VHSL's fault. Jamestown should not be in the playoffs. There's no reason for a team. I forgot what their record was, but they shouldn't have been in the playoffs. I believe Cumberland also made the playoffs. They were 0-10. I mean, this is ridiculous. Don't know why this is being caused, but playoffs should be something special. Football, any sport, it should be something special. Now, I understand in certain tournament sports, maybe you want to have, more teams in the playoffs, like in basketball. Maybe it makes sense to have more teams than in football, where you can't play that many football games in a week, and then it begins to encroach on winter sports. So anyway, you have ridiculous outcomes like we had this year. Someone needs to explain that, and someone needs to take accountability for that, and to make some changes so that that doesn't happen again. Also, you have the size of the regions. So Prince William County, I believe, the schools there, the regions, I believe, are 18 or 19 teams, whereas in some regions, like I believe in Loudoun County, it's like 10 teams. And what that does is the Great Stonebridge team, they had a bye in the first round of the playoffs. Why are we having buys in the playoffs? Well, I believe there's only 10 teams in the region. So they get a bye, whereas in Prince William, it's much tougher to qualify for the playoffs. Not as tough as it was when I was in school, but still tougher than it is in Loudoun. There should be equity. And if you have fewer classifications, it's easier to group schools in the general geographic area, so that doesn't happen anymore. It doesn't make no sense to have Stonebridge and Briar Woods to have a bye in the playoffs. Let's be realistic. Also, the best teams don't play. Maury is in Class 5, right? So obviously, Maury has beaten Highland Springs, who's in the Class 6 final. Maury has beaten Wise from Maryland, the Class 4 champion, the highest classification in Maryland, has beaten them. So no matter what happens next weekend, even if Maury does win 5, beats Stonebridge, a great team, and even if a great Freedom team beats Highland Springs, an amazing program, Maury's going to have a claim to being the best team in the state, which is probably unfair to Maury and unfair to Freedom. They would like a chance to play Maury. These teams should be in the same classification. Obviously, Maury is beating teams from all over the place. Incremental sizes of student population, does that make that big a difference? The success that goes into a program has so much more to do with the size of school. So, 6 classifications, it doesn't make any sense. Definitely not for football, but obviously, for basketball or all other sports. I know I mentioned Loudoun County only having 10 teams in region. I believe every year, 2 teams in Loudoun County, and 2 teams from each Loudoun County classification go to state. 2 teams. So yeah, we went to state. Well, that's not that big a deal. If you don't go to state, you almost didn't have a good year. Now that we need to examine that and see if we can get to a more reasonable type of playoff system. I did mention PowerPoints this year. Madison and South Lakes were in the same district. Concord in the same district every year. South Lakes beat Madison and was undefeated. But Madison was the top seed because of PowerPoints. Well, that doesn't make any sense. If South Lakes beats Madison and they beat everybody else, they should be the top seed in the playoffs. Well, they have to use PowerPoints because of districts include different classification of teams. So there's no other way really to create a playoff system. So the PowerPoint system makes sense because of the way we do classifications. But if we eliminate 2 or 3 classifications, we can do away with the PowerPoint systems, and we could probably endeavor to have districts with teams in 1 classification, and then whoever wins that district, they're the higher seed in the playoffs. So anyway, so many ridiculous outcomes, and I think they need to be addressed. I do want to get back to basketball again, and I've done several episodes on basketball and how ridiculous it is. The postseason is, and just the structure is. Teams play over and over and over again. They play twice. Sometimes they'll play twice in the regular season. They'll play in regionals, and then they'll play in state again just to get to the final. It happened with Brentsville, Meridian, and girls, I believe. I think Brentsville won the 4th battle. I know Edison and Hayfield and boys played 4 or 5 times last year. The postseason, regional states, we should get new matchups and breathe fresh air into these games. It shouldn't be the same games over and over again. And we should be able to travel a little bit. It should be lifetime memories, not the fifth time we play Edison High School is the state game. And obviously last year, the ridiculous outcome that Madison girls and Madison boys in basketball played at the exact same time. And so that the students from Madison couldn't see both games. Now, obviously, I've talked about this ad nauseum. We can do some double headers. That's not rocket science. Let's just get it done. So, whenever I talk about this with the VHSL, people always say, "Oh, Julian, you don't know what you're talking about. It's the small schools. It's Northern Virginia. It's the wealthy schools." There's never any accountability. There's never anyone who says, there's never like a Larry Johnson type figure to say, look, why do we have this ridiculous structure for our high school sports and in our postseason? And then, again, whether it is the small schools, you think it's unfair. I think the goal should be a competitive environment. It will bring big crowds, create the best in competition and talent and the best memories. That's not necessarily making everyone champion. Sometimes we have to tell these entitled principals and athletic directors, yes, you want to win the state title. Everyone does. Everyone wants that. But in this day of entitlement, sometimes that's not what's best for the collective. What is best for the VH? What is best for sports? It's not that the little schools win things. Maybe we should just tell them that they won, send them a plaque, and then settle these sports on the field. That's what we need to do. Next weekend, we don't want to, if Maury happens to beat Stonebridge and Freedom happens to beat Highland Springs, we shouldn't have to spend the whole offseason talking about who's best, Maury or Freedom. They should have to play. They're the best teams. That's what playoffs are all about. I was listening to a podcast. Larry Bird was on Dan Patrick's wonderful podcast. And he was talking about Indiana playoffs. And at the time, as probably people know, there was only one state champion in Indiana for basketball. Not sure about the other sports. But Bird felt it was a privilege for him to play Crispus Attucks in Indianapolis and St. Albany, the bigger schools. They thought of it as an honor to play them. And not a privilege. They weren't entitled to play them or even win a state championship. Just they wanted to fight for the honor of playing those schools. That's what needs to be created. That's what the VHL needs to be created. Now, what can we do? I really don't know, because every time I talk about these things, nothing ever happens. But I know the VHSL is overseen by an executive committee. I know the chairman of the committee is Corey Franklin, the principal of Glenvar High School. If you go on the VHSL website, you can see the executive committee members in your area. So go on the VHSL.org. The executive committee is on the website. Get the names of the members, email them, call them, ask them why it's like the way it is and what we can do to create a more meaningful structure and more meaningful postseason for all of our sports. Thanks for listening.